Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Ask the Editor. This is a live streamed broadcast where we take your questions on various topics. Basically, as we're all holed up in our homes, in our neighborhoods, not headed out to work, as a society, we try to tamp down coronavirus and COVID-19 from spreading further, overwhelming the health system. Everyone knows that story. I'm not going to get into that too much today. What we have, I think, is a really neat show because we've got local educators who are coming on to talk to us about one of the things that has changed most dramatically in our society, and that's moving students out of the classroom and into full online learning. Now, this has occurred not only in North Jersey, but throughout the state and in many states. It's also occurring at the college and university level, where we have students who were shipped home and are now doing online learning. I have a student in my own home doing that at the college level, and I have one at the high school level. Today, we're going to be talking with educators from the Garfield Public Schools District. Garfield is a district of about 5,000 students overall, and it's very diverse. It's incredibly multicultural, and they put in place over the last year a program that gave the bulk of their students laptops, Chromebooks, allowing them to access the internet in a fashion that was both economical and easy to do for them and for their teachers. And it is coming incredibly handy right now for the Garfield School District. So joining us today will be a couple of teachers, but I first want to chat with the Assistant Curriculum Supervisor, Anna D'Agostino. Hello, Anna. Welcome.
Hi, Dan. How are you? Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Good to see you. I was over visiting with Anna and students at Garfield Schools, what, about a month ago or so?
Early March. We just made it.
Yeah. And it was a great time. I got to spend time with students in the elementary school, in the middle school, and at the high school. And we talked about journalism. We talked about their aspirations, what they're looking to do, and really, really great programs taking place in Garfield now, and really engaged students. One of the things that why I wanted to bring Garfield Schools on, again, was to talk a little bit about the Chromebook program. And so, Anna, maybe you can talk just a little bit about how that came into being and how it's worked out so far.
Sure. I know we've been looking into it for the past few years. It's been the plan. And we started with maybe last year or the year before getting all of the students with their own Garfield school email accounts. And then once we acquired the funding through the title funds, Bruno at MRA was great with getting us about, I think, 3,300 new HP laptops this year. And they stored it until we were ready. They delivered them. They did the quality control on it. And once we were ready to get them out to the students, our supervisor of technology and the IT department got them out in a pretty timely manner, considering the amount of laptops that we had to distribute. And although we have 5,000 students in the district, the laptops that we had previous to this order were actually then made available for the lower grades, so that everybody essentially has access to these laptops now.
It's really fantastic. And in a situation where we have everyone doing distance learning, it's had to come in incredibly useful in terms of connecting with your students. Nonetheless, though, people have to connect to the internet and they have to be able to get to it. And you and I were talking the other day just about some possibilities for folks who may not have internet in their homes. And you said you had begun researching and looking at a few programs by the cable companies.
Yes, we did hear of, I believe it's called Altice, is a company that offered free Wi-Fi for the students. Luckily, when this was all coming into place within the 24 hours, we really did do an excellent job as a district of pulling together to get the information that we needed. And our tech department surveyed the district. I believe we had such a small number of students that wouldn't have Wi-Fi access. So it was maybe 22, I believe. So we do believe that the majority of our students are able to access Wi-Fi. And if they're not, we've sent out emails for companies that may be offering free Wi-Fi for this time.
That's really fantastic. Now, the other thing that I think is interesting when we take a look at a situation like this is it tends to, and every time you change something in your work environment or take on a new challenge, and this is certainly a new challenge for teachers in your district, but throughout the state, you add to the skill set quite a bit. And looking on the very bright side of everyone being out of the schools and locked in their homes, your students and your teachers are going to have much more broad technology skills than they might have had if this were not the case. We're talking about teleconferencing, we're talking about using Google Classroom or other tools, Schoology, whatever it might be, different software programs. Talk a little bit about that and the effect that you see that having as a curriculum supervisor going forward, and how that might integrate a bit.
Yeah, I have to say, not that there's a perfect time for any of this, but it really did work out well that beginning in September, we had so many new initiatives this year between beginning IXL, and we went to Newsella Pro with the one-to-one laptops. We were already on our way to be ready for the distance learning. The students had built that relationship with the teachers through Teams on Microsoft. Some teachers do prefer to use the Google Classroom, so we do allow whatever platform gets the students engaged and working well together with the teachers from a distance. Luckily, we did get the beginning months of the year to get some training in and the professional development, and the teachers and students have built that relationship, which had this happened earlier on in the year wouldn't be as strong as it is now. So they're getting great response from the students, and we have been training for this, luckily.
That's great. It's terrible that we're in this spot, but being prepared, as we're seeing, is such a key to getting through anything like this. And we're seeing that as a society. You're seeing it in your district. Before we bring, Nicholas and Lilly in, two teachers in the district, talk a little bit about, as a curriculum supervisor, if there are any adjustments that you've made over the last few weeks that you've talked to teachers about regarding what they're presenting to the students in this online environment.
Yes, when we were first told, again, everybody kind of had in New Jersey maybe 24 to 48 hours to put together some lesson plans. So the teachers did a wonderful job of getting that done on time. As we're into week 3 of the remote learning, we're realizing some of the modifications that may need to be made to those lessons. And it's basically about flexibility. We just tell all the supervisors and administration are letting the teachers know it's okay to be flexible. We still need to treat the children as individuals, as you would in the classroom. Continue to do it on a student-by-student basis. We don't know what every home life is like and when they have time to access the work, or they are helping siblings, what they have on their plate as well. So this is definitely a learning process. And anybody who feels that they need training, our IT department is continuing with through email, through links, that they can still try to get some professional development in anything that they want to move forward with.
We actually have a question that came in on the chat. It's a good one. And before we bring in Nick and Lilly, and the question is, what works best in Garfield? Is it keeping to the daily schedule that you have, of classes, and each day you go through certain classes, or has that been modified in some way, like you were talking about?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, because I've seen districts that do that. They report for class as a delayed opening schedule. In Garfield, because of the amount of families that they do, they have a lot of siblings in other schools. We don't believe that would be the best route for us right now, to hold them to a set schedule throughout the day. We have a lot of high school students who may be more comfortable working on something later on in the day if they're assisting parents or younger siblings in the morning hours. So we've been very flexible, and that's one thing that the teachers have been wonderful with. I've been invited on Zoom classroom sessions at 8 p.m. because that's when they'll get the most attendance for their students. It's really been about flexibility and adjusting for us. So in Garfield, due to the high number of students, that's what works best for us.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Anna. When you're taking a look at online learning environments, it's not a one-size-fits-all. It really has to be crafted for the specific district, for the specific students, how big the district is, how technologically advanced they are, what access to equipment they have. So it's really interesting. So let's bring in now, we have Lilly Ryden. She's a teacher, I want to say language arts and English in the middle school in Garfield. And we have Nicholas Delahanty, who is in TV production at the high school, correct?
Yes.
Welcome to you both. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
It's great. And one of the things that I'm curious about is, as you plan your day with your students, depending on, and I'm sure some days are busier than others. And how are you going about creating lesson plans, and how is that differing from what you might do if you were in a physical classroom? And I'll go to Lilly first here, because I think Nick might have an interesting take given TV production and video use and all of that. But let's talk to Lilly just about how she's planning and how you're planning your day and your lessons.
Well, as Anna was mentioning, we did have a limited amount of time prior to the school actually closing to plan. So what worked out was we got together by grade level and sat down and said, okay, you know what? Let's just work completely 100% together on our lesson plans. Let's do the exact same thing across the board for the next 2 weeks. So if a teacher gets stuck, if a student gets stuck, we can all kind of relate to each other and piggyback off of one another for any sort of support that we need. So typically we are all really involved in lesson planning per grade level, but even more so now, considering the amount of technology that was going to be used going into this.
That's an interesting point when you touch on how you're relying upon one another. And I think that probably happens organically in schools when you see each other, maybe, in the hallways, or you've got a prep period that you can catch up with one of your colleagues. But are you finding that you've got to take that extra step right now to get in touch, maybe do a video conference with teachers, or, you call them up on the phone or email? How is that working? How's that collaboration working?
It's actually happening, as you said, very organically, even with the lack of physically being in the same building with each other. I know since I'm split between 7th and 8th grade, I'm actually currently on a text message chat with a lot of the ELA 8th grade teachers. But at the same time, I've been using a lot of the video chatting functions with some of the 7th grade teachers. So it's just kind of split, and whatever tends to work for everyone, we just kind of hop into it and just talk about what we need to talk about.
Yeah, my wife is a teacher over in Ridgefield, and I hear her all day doing the same thing, collaborating with her coworkers, talking to students, and it does happen surprisingly organically with it. Let's hop over to Nick here, because I'm interested. You teach TV production, correct? In the high school, and this would seem to be a little bit of a natural in terms of connecting with your students, but maybe it's not. How do your classes work when you're not dealing with quote unquote a traditional subject like English or math or history, something like that, where a lot of TV production, I would imagine, is hands-on. So how do you get around that? How do you work toward that with your students?
Absolutely. A lot of it is hands-on, given the fact of, with regards to television production, you're teaching video work, you're teaching editing work, you're teaching on-air skills. Some of the things that you really can't do through a computer. When thinking about lesson plans, I was trying to not only kind of review what we've gone over so far, but also provide the students with opportunities to work on the skills that I was teaching before this all happened. So incorporating lessons where the students may record a video of them speaking and post it in a chat and have a little forum through Microsoft Teams, or going through an editing process or a project that they've done and kind of breaking down what they can improve on, what they learned from it, things that they noticed while working on the project. Just some of those things I can tie into the online learning process. Yes, it's a whole lot different. You would think that with the media side of it, online learning will go hand in hand. But in regards to the coursework, we've had to kind of alter it a little bit as we go, given the circumstance.
Yeah, that's certainly understandable. But it's, it is amazing. I think, I see it with my own kids and teachers that I know, and talk about how quickly students tend to adapt to new environments and new ways of learning. Often it's us adults that have a little bit more trouble dealing with it, but the students themselves seem to jump right in. And it brings another thought to my mind about, we all knew it when we were in school, and certainly if you're a teacher, you've got sometimes those students that are tough to reach in the classroom. I'm wondering if we see some students who may not do so well in a traditional classroom are really shining or coming to life a bit in an online environment. And I wonder if we're seeing or hearing of anything like that. Either one of you.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Definitely, from what I'm seeing with my groups, I had actually been using the Microsoft Teams platform with all of my classes since earlier in the school year, I'd say possibly November. So a lot of them already had familiarity with what they were doing and what the expectations were. However, now that everything's online, we're not physically seeing them, I am noticing that there is definitely a good chunk of students that they really need limited guidance. They know exactly what they need to do. And even some that in the classroom may have had certain tech issues or I guess for lack of better phrasing, they wanted to just be sure that they were doing the right thing. Even them, they're just shining. They're really not having a lot of issues and they're doing exactly what they need to be doing. Even some students that I would see in person that I would have to constantly, give them little pushes and reminders of, hey, you got to do this. There's definitely a nice chunk of them that they don't need those reminders and they know what they have to do.
That's great. That's great. Nick, any unexpected challenges that have come your way that you're dealing with now, or that you've figured out and adjusted course on?
I think the biggest challenge for me, and I'm going to be completely honest about this, is the fact of I wanted to make sure that all my students knew I was there for them at any given time. Given that we're not logging in at a certain time, it does create that question as to when students are going on. Do they need my help? We're scheduled to be online throughout a certain time each and every day. But if a student has a question later on in the day, I feel that it's my job as an educator to make sure I'm there at any given time. So it was a little bit of an adjustment period for me, considering that I felt as if I had to be near the computer at all times just to make sure my students were okay and they didn't need anything from me. But as the 2 weeks have gone by, I've learned, you can adjust to it. I've given my students ample opportunities to reach out via Microsoft Teams and email. So I feel like I've attacked that in a way. But that was, to me, the biggest challenge, is making sure that I'm there whenever a student does, in fact, need me at any given time of the day.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think that you speak to a challenge that's not only occurring in the classroom, but in many industries where, certainly the school day is pretty set, even from district to district, and work days tend to be pretty set. But now we're all in our homes, and the work day is extended, sometimes even through the weekend. Like you said, you might be hopping on Zoom meetings at 8 p.m. at night with classes, but you find other ways to adjust to that. And I think that schedule adjustment is really something that has to be overcome in so many ways, because you have to get used to a non-traditional schedule. And in schools, it was so, always so regimented. The bell would ring and you move on to the next class, and so on and so forth. And this is a little bit more freewheeling. How about students themselves? Any issues with them in terms of, or anxiety or nervousness, or are they just rolling with it?
They're basically just rolling with it. Sometimes, I'll get some students chatting me, wanting clarification on an assignment, which is fine. But what I've also noticed is that there's definitely a decent amount of students that they do experience tech issues. So I feel like there's a good chunk of time that while I am still teaching them, I'm also helping them troubleshoot. So for instance, earlier today I had, and we noticed this in my department, this was a little glitch, I think. If you went into Microsoft Teams and tried to open a document, for some students, it wasn't like letting them physically type in it as it would normally. So we had to troubleshoot and figure it out, and we've gotten through it. So there is a lot of that going on.
Yeah. I totally can. Today I'm going through it myself, so I can totally relate with my internet going in and out, and trying to figure out actually how to do this video conference. I'm actually using a hotspot right now because my internet has proved not to be reliable today, which I think a lot of people are dealing with because these networks are overloaded with so many people chatting. We've got another question to throw out there, and I've heard from folks who have kids at the of their own at home, whether they're in grade school or high school, and have to work or teach, and the challenges there of working with your own kids, working with your students. Are either of you facing that, or have you dealt with parents who are facing those things, or colleagues?
Well, I myself am not a parent, so I at least have just the focus of my students. So while I'm working with them, I'm only working with them. I maybe have the distraction of my cats, but I don't think that really counts. But what I have noticed, there have been some parents that have reached out and, they would like clarification on assignments, or they want to make sure that they're looking in the right places to assist their children. But there's been a couple that have said, it's hard, it's difficult. And the one thing that I keep doing is just telling them, hey, listen, you can always get me on email. If you even want, like, pop into your kids' teams and I'll hop on Zoom or what have you with you. I don't mind. So I just keep giving them that, I keep letting them know that I'm there for them. And if they need anything that could potentially make their life easier, I will work with them however I possibly can.
That's great. That's great. So as we wrap up here, and we've got a couple of more things to touch on, but do you have any advice, either of you, Nick or Lily, or Anna, advice to other teachers from things that you've learned over the past few weeks regarding online instruction and classrooms that are non-traditional? Nick?
Well, I could jump in. I'm actually in a special predicament because not only am I a teacher in the district, but my sister is a teacher in the district as well. So we're running 2 classrooms within one household. So it's been a lot of fun. They're actually, she's a elementary school special education teacher. So she's doing live learning with the students, and you have no idea how excited these kids are to get online just for even 45 to 50 minutes a day to discuss the lessons and to go over things. The thing that I've learned from that is don't be afraid to interact with the students and to reach out and see if they need any help. I send out a daily email to my kids every so often. I'll send them a message through Microsoft Teams. I'll give them the option to call me on Teams as part of a group chat or whatnot, whatever they may need from me. The biggest thing is to talk to other educators. I've been in contact with a bunch of friends who have been around a long time, who have been teaching, and they've given some really good tips and examples that I can use and have really helped me grow as a learner. So I think the biggest thing is to be flexible, be patient, help the students in any way you can, and don't be afraid to reach out to other teachers because we're all in the same boat. We're all trying to adjust on the fly. So it's good to get different ideas and different concepts, to ways of teaching that you might not have implemented before.
That's great, Nick. How about you, Lily?
I just want to actually touch on something that Nick said, where he was mentioning relying on other educators, which is a huge thing because in this case, collaboration is essential. But also rely on the students because they are very tech savvy. So there sometimes are issues where I'm sitting there and I'm trying to figure it out, or I'm Googling it, trying to figure it out. And then a student will just pop in and say, hey, do this, and it works. So sometimes, especially with the tech issues, ask the kids because they might know.
And I will say the toughest question for last, and for Anna, and then no one's got an answer to it, but everyone is asking, when are we all going back to school? And I'm sure you guys have heard that multiple times from parents and from students, and that's a tough one, right? Because no one knows. The governor is saying, I think it's April 18th or so before they're even going to look at it again before deciding. So we are certainly in this for the long haul, and hopefully we'll get through it, and school will resume before summertime. But if not, clearly you guys have a handle on how this should get done, and it's inspirational, and it's a model to be followed. So I congratulate you on that, and thank you so much for spending this half hour with us and answering questions and talking about your experiences. So again, Anna D'Agostino, Lilly Ryden, and Nicholas Delahanty from Garfield Schools. Thanks again. It's been great. And you've been watching.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For all those tuning in, this was Ask the Editor on northjersey.com. We will be rolling out a number of different shows over the next week or so, not only with me, thankfully, but with folks from our sports department in other areas, talking about all manner of topics as we work through this, shutdown of really of the way we live and altering of life. So stick with us. I encourage you, please support the journalism that we are doing by subscribing to northjersey.com. You can do that going across the ticker on the bottom, northjersey.com/subscribe. Even your subscription helps keep us working, helps keep us reporting and doing these great interviews with local folks who are really making it happen. So again, thanks to everyone for tuning in, and thanks to our educators. Have a good day.